Hello and welcome to another episode of Going Pro, and today we have Joel Kerley, who was a former professional tennis player and a highly respected coach with many years of experience in the sport. After competing at the highest level, Joel's transitioned into coaching, where he's been very successful training the likes of Thanasi, Kokkinakis and a lot of other SA talent. And you have a deep understanding of the game, both on and off the court, and have been a big mentor for many players here. And now you're part of the team at TennisSA, where you are coach, relationship and education manager, which is how we've gotten a little bit more connected through the club professional course that I've been doing this year. So it's been really good to get to know what you do and just having that dialogue where, for me, in the club sector, working with performance, just trying to have that relationship with someone at TennisSA so we can all collaborate together and just use you as a soundboard so that we can actually get somewhere with what we're doing, but also work in collaboration with TennisSA so we can create that cohesion, which is going to help us build the next champion and just make sure that things run smoothly and there's understanding on both sides, which I think is really important for all coaches and clubs in the state so that we can actually, like I said, really improve the way things are run. So thank you so much, first of all, for coming down. I appreciate it. I know you're a busy man. And I really want to get into talking about your junior career. I actually don't know much about what it was like in your junior career. I've heard stories from Todd Perry when I was working for him for a while. I know you guys were close in the past and close friends. So I want to know a little bit more about what it was like as a junior. Were you always kind of the benchmark in the state? What are some key kind of things that happened in your junior career? And then how did you transition towards becoming professional?
Yeah, probably a little bit of a unique story. I started playing tennis in the mid-north of South Australia, so I wasn't initially from Adelaide. I grew up in a town where there was probably 20 kids in the school, 7 or 8 streets and 3 tennis courts. So Dad was probably...
Whereabouts?
Kalunga was the town, so
okay.
You think Clare?
Yep.
Probably half an hour north of Clare.
Yeah, nice.
Just a strong sporting family where Mum and Dad put the time into spending time with me at the courts, playing footy, whatever I wanted to do, they were there. Kind of got talent ID'd by a coach in Port Pirie. And then one of my best mates, Lachlan Ferguson, was hitting with him on centre court. And the state coach at the time, Graham Neville, saw me hitting and said, "Hey, look, do you want to come down for some squads in the city?" So for probably 2 years, we would travel 2 hours on a Monday, down, 2 hours back. So we did.
At what time? Like, was this after school?
No, that started. We had to be here. I reckon it was by 4 o'clock. So we'd leave about 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah. So you would leave school early and then you would travel Mondays, just on Monday.
On Mondays.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it got to a point where I think I was doing 2 days of the week. By the time I was in year 7, primary school was to year 7 at that stage.
Yeah.
And then we moved to the city. Whole family moved when I was in year 8. So sister, mum and dad. And went to Marrickville High School, was in the SASI program here. To that point, under 10s, I was probably playing a few tournaments, maybe 4 or 5. I was really lucky because we had a really strong age group coming through. There was probably 4 or 5 guys in the top, I'm going to say 15 in Australia. Some of those were in the top 5. So to probably... I'm going to say 10s, 12s, sitting around that mark. And then at 14, I was kind of 1, 2.
Sure.
And then 16 and 18 through those years, I was kind of 1 or 2. But yeah, I think in the really young stages, I was kind of... We had great depth. So just quality matches, great people around... The sport's probably changed a little bit. You spend all day at the tennis centre. You play your 2 weeks of school holidays. So I'd always come down from the country in the school holidays, and there was probably normally 2 tournaments, and we would just play all day and kick the footy at the back of the oval out at Millswood and those sort of things. So it was a little bit different to how it works now. It's probably one of the things that stands out with junior tournaments now compared to then. But yeah, I think if you looked at it, it'd probably be 4, 5 through the 10s, 12s age group, and then probably number 1 through 14, 16 and 18. And that was in Australia as well. So
yeah, nice.
We played Junior Davis Cup. I was the number 1 player for that under 16s. And then number 1 18 player for the ITF. So that's kind of how my journey, in a really brief summary, went through from the country through to under 18.
When you were coming down from your town to play in those initial squads that you were in, what were you doing? Were you only training once a week, and then how were you training back home? How consistent was it?
Yeah, it would be different to a lot of people. My dad was a good tennis player, but
so he was hands-on you guy then, just always hit balls with him.
Yeah, but not in a way where it was him driving it. It was really me. I'd either have a football or a tennis racket in my hand. It was never, and I was lucky enough to have parents that were involved in that too, that enjoyed spending time playing sports with me. And it was, Dad, can we go down to the tennis courts and hit some balls?
So do you think that's a big reason why it just came naturally, and why maybe other kids spend so much more time than what you had playing, but you were naturally just, I guess, had more because you just grew up kicking, throwing, playing all sports under the sun, always doing it?
Yeah,
compared
I think
to maybe
so.
The kids now that they're not doing that as much. You think that's a huge difference?
I think you've got to put the time in. I don't think you can expect to be good and not put the time or the work into what you're doing in your craft. Obviously, you don't want to be too young and specialising too young. But for me, it was just, I probably still did, 3 or 4 times I'd go down to the courts. It's just not as structured. It was more about, hey, let me just hit some balls and play. And then we would kind of use the Mondays as the big training session in the city, and then tournament play during the school holidays. But I wasn't, and it probably helped me a little bit, as I didn't have to hit a huge amount of balls as I got older to find the touch of, if you haven't picked up a racket in a week, I'd still struggle, but it'd only take me a couple of days to get back if you take a week off. And Graham Neville and Mark McMahon at the time were unbelievably good in terms of how they helped from distance and things like that. So
Sure.
I would still say I put the time in, but for me it was never about a chore of doing it. It was just something that I did and loved. Like if someone said to me, hey, how do you want to have fun? Well, having fun to me was going down to the tennis courts, hitting some balls, and then playing in the playground afterwards, or kicking the ball in the front yard and seeing how many goals you can kick. And sometimes it would be by myself, and sometimes it would be Dad kicking with me. And I did have a coach in Port Pirie, Mark Hanlon, who I would see once a week probably also. So there was some structure to that as well, with private lessons on top of what hitting balls with Dad was all about as well. And he did a lot for me in terms of the technical side of it in Port Pirie. So it might have been, I don't exactly remember the days, but it might have been Monday down here and Wednesdays in Port Pirie.
Yeah. And how was it for the family to move? Because was that solely for your tennis? And how was that? Because that can be quite challenging.
Yeah, it's a big move. I know we were never on the land, so it wasn't necessarily a off the farm type, which is probably for country people a lot more of a commitment. But I think,
how was that adjustment?
For
Not
them
just
or
for
me?
you, but for both. For you, obviously easier because you had tennis, but
Well, for me, the adjustment going into a school. So I went to Marrickville High School on the tennis program there, who were fantastic. The adjustment was fairly big because the number of kids was substantially more than what it was at Kalunga Primary School. But I guess we'll talk about this in a little bit, but the adjustment for me was I was only probably there for a year and a half, 2 years before I had to move to Melbourne, so to join the RAS. So I was really not there a great deal. The initial adjustment was tough, but I still had my family and my network around me, and the coaches that were working with me previously were still working with me. But the adjustment for me wasn't too bad. My sister, I think if you said, do you really want to be in the country or in the city now, she'd say, look, I love being in the city. And then my parents, that's just the sacrifice I think that they were willing to make. So we haven't really spoken that much about it, but I don't, like, the adjustment for them didn't seem like it was too bad.
And do they still live in the city now?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. So you talked about going to Melbourne. So you spent a couple of years, obviously your tennis was exploding, and you got to go to the AAS. Was that you by yourself? And then how long were you then doing schooling through AAS?
Yeah, so we had a we moved at the time. The AIS was based in Melbourne, so we had foster families basically in Melbourne that we lived with. So we were fortunate enough to have a lovely family that we played tennis with, who was our age. It was Lachlan and myself.
So you guys went together, and lived with this family.
Yeah. So we probably spent a fair bit of time in Melbourne that year, and then during that year, you also spent a fair bit of time in Barcelona. So it was kind of based. You could kind of go 6 months in Australia during the summer and 6 months in Europe during their summer, from kind of 15 onwards. So
was that like at an academy?
That was at the Sanchez Casal Academy in Barcelona.
Yeah.
So that was the base, and then you'd kind of play your tournaments around that area and kind of go from there. So
it makes sense why you accelerated so much. Like you were already living in Melbourne, what, 14, 15?
Oh, 15, 16.
Yeah,
We did that.
And then by 18, you're the best in the country.
Yep. So I stayed with the AIS through that time. I think there was maybe 1 year where I probably just needed to be home a little bit more, because it's a fairly big commitment. You kind of get on the train at 6 a.m. in the morning. You train for, back then the training hours were quite substantial, and then you got not getting home to 6, 7 o'clock at night. So on the train home. So it's a big week, and I probably felt like it was a big thing for me coming from the country, because I probably didn't know what I was getting myself into coming from the country into all of a sudden this is what I'm doing.
Huge explosion. Yeah. That's what I was going to ask. Like, how did you handle that being country boy then to just like thrust it in to huge commitment, and then living interstate, then traveling overseas, training all the time? I missed
having roots. So I miss having those South Australian people that I could trust and speak to, parents, coaches, those sort of things. I probably struggled with that a little bit. The AIS was fantastic. It just probably at times was quite full on, and it hit you pretty hard straight away. But once you kind of got used to it, it was that was just what it was. But yeah, just a South Australian guy that loved Adelaide, that loved the country. Probably struggled with that initially.
Did you mentally break down at all? Did you have moments where you just wanted to throw it away? Like, how did you work through what was happening when it was like that?
I probably 16. I basically wanted to give the game away. There was a couple of times that I wanted to give the game away. Again, come back to Graham here in South Australia. We were practicing for like half an hour a day. That was it. Let's just do half an hour. So we just did a block of that to regain the love of it. Because I think no matter what you do in any sport, it's ebbs and flows. Like, there's going to be times where it gets tough and you want to try and change something. But I don't think it has to be all or nothing. And that's what Graham taught me, is you don't have to throw it all away. Just drop it back here for a little bit. And him knowing me a little bit better than probably some of the coaches externally, because at that stage you go away with a different coach on every trip, so it was kind of like, hang on, you don't really know what I've gone through on the trip before, whereas he's always been there to kind of go, look, well, I know who you are, let's just take this back to half an hour. So I actually found that really beneficial. So I actually won an ITF in Darwin, I can't remember, I think it was a grade 3 at the time, and just training off half an hour, just because the quality of that half an hour was unbelievably good, and I was enjoying my tennis again.
That goes a long way. I think a lot of people are scared to really strip it back, but maintain quality and just keep the enjoyment up.
I think everyone thinks it's got to be all or nothing.
Yeah.
And when I say all, it was like 4 or 5 hours of on court, and keeping in mind things have changed a lot since then. It was not necessarily understanding the mental load that was coming with that as well. Whereas a lot more coaches these days do. They understand that, which is great. But yeah, I think for me it was just having someone that understood you to be able to strip it back and just go, it's okay to do half an hour or an hour and build from there. It wasn't that it was just half an hour and that's all I wanted to do. It was, okay, let's just take it back and then build that from there again, just to make sure you're really solid with what you're doing.
Nice. What sort of player were you? What made you tough to beat in your up until like on 18 in your junior career?
That's a good question. I was an all-court player that needed to be aggressive, but when I got in bad habits, I'd play too defensive. So if I was standing too far behind the baseline, that's when I was in trouble. If I actually played with some risk and started moving forward, finishing points at net, that's where I was probably at my best. For a guy that's roughly 6 foot, I had a decent serve. I could kick serve. I could hit it to 215 if I wanted to. So I had a decent serve for my height. But yeah, it was probably more so aggression. I could kind of do most things without too many flaws unless I got pushed further back in the court, which is what I did mentally.
And what held you back? Was it more mental than anything else?
Yeah. So in the end, what it was, I just didn't want to travel anymore. Like I'd done 6 years of travel from 15 through to 2021, and I was just, I was probably 600 in the world. I went to about 20 in the world ITF juniors. So I was tracking reasonably well, but I couldn't have done what some of the people that have gone out there and done for the last 15 years have been able to do with the travel side of things.
Okay. Shows it takes a different kind of person to be able to withstand that travel.
100%, especially from Australia.
Yeah.
Especially from Australia. Do
you think that's why it's harder to build a champion from Australia?
I think back then, potentially. I think now, globalisation with the technology and things like that make it a little bit easier. Like, you can call home and be on FaceTime or whatever you wanted to be on. But then it was, you may have a touch point once every week and that's all you can get. Which makes it a bit easier now. But I still think geographically, some of these guys, Thanasi and Lee, they go away in end of Jan, and they don't see Australia again until November unless they specifically allow time in their schedule to come back. So, that's a tough gig. It's a really tough gig that a lot of Europeans and Americans don't necessarily need to do. So I do think geographically there is an element of that, but I think it's become a little bit easier just with the way that modern society is. Yeah.
So you got to 20 ITF junior. How did your junior career transition to the men's game?
Did
you transition straight away at 17, 18?
Yes, I think I got my first ATP points at maybe 15, 16. I must have been 16. And I didn't play a huge amount of ATP events during that period because it was a big thing back then. Your junior circuit was pretty big. It was one of those things that you really wanted to get exposure to the Grand Slams and those sort of things. So most of them played a lot of that ITF circuit. There was a few, Yindadals that were kind of ATP went that route, but majority of it was ITF. And then when that finished, I played a couple of qualies events at the Australian Open. I probably, looking back on it physically, needed to probably do a little bit more. I wasn't... In juniors, you can last for a period of time at the level, but at seniors, you get pretty found out if it's, you don't have a big enough ball or physically you can't hold the level that you're playing at for a longer period. That's probably, looking back on it now,
makes sense.
In hindsight, would be the thing that I would say if I was to do it again, I'd do that differently.
That, and then just the being on the road with 2 little road blocks, I guess.
That's the big one. At the end of the day, physically, I was fast enough. It doesn't take that much to work on your endurance and build your legs. People now at 18 probably don't have the legs until they're 23 anyway, so it might have come naturally. But the big one was just being away from home and those sort of things from such a young age was probably what ended up making my choice.
Sure. Were there some memorable stories or matches that you think about that stood out for different reasons?
Oh, yeah, there's heaps. I played Gail Monfils at the Australian Open. I was 6'4", 5'3" up, 40-15 up, and he was serving, playing on show court 1 or 2, and he comes up with a second serve ace, and just blew me to shreds. I couldn't recover from it.
You literally just couldn't handle that he hit a second serve like that.
Literally on the line,
and you were just thinking about that
the whole time. It was funny because in the third set he started cramping, like it was just a slug in the third set. But it was a memorable match in the fact that I still can vision that ball hitting the line now, which is not great, but it did happen. But that was probably the most memorable match. I had a lot of good experiences, met a lot of good people, those sort of things. But yeah, in terms of a match, when you ask me, that's the first one that would come to my head.
Yeah. And you made it very obvious to us in the course about your winning record. One of the few people in the world to have a winning record against Djokovic. Is that true or false?
I knew that was coming. No, it's true. But I think the story behind it is, I'll just say it was 2-1, but the story behind it is the two were pretty early on in our lives. It was 14 years old. And then the one that he won was fairly convincing in his manner. He was 17 and I was 18. I think it was, I can't even remember the score, but I didn't get too many games and I played well.
Yeah.
I played pretty well that day. So that was probably, in reference, he's probably won 5 games that way. So that was good. I mean, it is true though.
You can take that. You can take that with you.
There's my claim to fame. There you go.
Yeah. So what put an end to your career was just basically not wanting to travel anymore. And what age was this?
21.
Wow, so early.
21. Yeah.
You just saw ahead that you just like, I just don't see myself continuing or withstanding this load and this travel.
Yeah.
It's just not the journey that I want.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
I was meant to get on a flight and just couldn't do it. I was about to fly back to Europe at the end. It was January. I know later, the year before, I was really struggling with some of my matches to, I guess, keep focus, like motivated. And then I got to January and I was kind of like, I just can't get on this flight. And the reason I know it was the right decision is I've never looked back on it and gone, what if?
Yeah. That's a good sign.
Yeah, I've never, not once. I mean, I admire all the people that I kind of grew up playing with that went and did it.
Yeah.
But for me...
Who are the notable ones that were that you were, I guess, around the same mark, same year, that you'd look at them and they've just continued to go and they've been doing it for years and years and years?
Monfils is one, obviously
Djokovic.
Yeah. Nadal was at the Junior Davis Cup, so he was in the other semi, but... so that sort of age group. Murray was practicing at Sanchez Casal at the time that we were there, so practiced with him quite a bit. But yeah, those sort of guys have gone on to play for a long period of time, which has been good. I mean, the game changed at that stage. Like people were winning tournaments at 16, 17 prior to that. Leighton won Adelaide here. And then the game's kind of changed to, look, they're not adults until they're 22, 23 now, so the expectation is you're tracking to that sort of level. Versus then it was 16, 17. Hey, have you won an ATP event yet? No, I haven't. Well,
what are you doing?
You're not any good.
Yeah. Did you need time off when you stopped and came back? Like, were you just cooked? What was your next move?
I think like any sports person, the next move's a tough one to kind of... You spend so long in your life kind of going, this is what I'm working towards. To find that is a difficult thing. So I probably naturally went into coaching because I liked helping people, and so that was kind of where I picked up that straight away. But I would say there was probably a period of time where I struggled to kind of figure out what it is that I wanted to do, for sure.
Yeah, and you were just coaching locally?
Yep. Well, I coached in Sydney for a couple of years. I got a role in Sydney and Parramatta for probably a year, I would have said, and then moved back to Adelaide.
Yeah. And that's kind of when your coaching career started to progress. You were working with Brod, Rowan, Dom in the city.
We had a really good group, and I remember getting a phone call from Rowan Fisher and said, would you like to come and help out in the performance program here in Adelaide, which I jumped at. And that really gave me some direction. I really enjoyed getting back out on court, because it was never tennis that I didn't... It was not tennis that I got burnt out from. It wasn't the game, it was more so what came with it, with the travelling side of things. And so when Rowan rang me, I jumped at the opportunity to kind of work with some of the younger guys that were coming through, because there was a good group of players that were coming through at that stage. And that's kind of what got me into coaching, just that feeling of helping someone else out or seeing them achieve something that you've helped them with.
Was it natural for you? Did you feel, because some people that have played professionally, they actually, I would look at them and I don't see them as natural coaches or good communicators at expressing things more simply.
Yeah.
Is that something that came naturally? Do you feel like it took a little bit of work to kind of find your feet, to communicate some things that you knew at a higher level to kids that were younger at 12, 13, 14?
Yeah, I think so. I think any player that's kind of played at a reasonable level often thinks they know everything, and turning that into a coaching, I guess, communication or how you're going to express that to someone else is not always easy. And I think it takes a little bit of time to learn your craft as to how you're going to get that across. And I think sometimes you'll find even the better players are often the ones that are a bit more selfish and only know it in their head, and they really struggle to express that. So naturally, I would have said yes, but I still needed to learn quite a lot of things in terms of the coaching side of it versus the playing side of it.
Yes.
It's all well and good to hit with someone and go, oh, look, you need to land the ball here.
Yeah.
But
Give them all the why behind things.
Yeah, to really explain it and to be able to do it in a way in which it's not boring and long-winded, I think is something that everyone needs to learn when they get into coaching.
Yeah. What sort of coaching style did you naturally kind of feel like you had? How would you say you naturally expressed yourself as a coach, or philosophy that started to come through naturally in the early days?
I would say, I'm going to say I knew the athlete fairly well. Like, I kind of got to know them quite well and was able to communicate and build the relationship with them. Definitely wasn't authoritarian. I was very communicate. Maybe at times a little soft. I needed to know when to go. No, that's not good enough. I was probably a little bit more on the athlete side of it. Really felt what they were feeling.
Yeah, probably didn't need another authoritarian in that group of coaches.
No.
There's some pretty big, strong coaches that said it how it was.
Yeah. So and I guess that was great for me to learn from, because Rod and Rowan were kind of at the different end of the spectrums in terms of the way in which they communicated. But yeah, I was probably more along that communication line and really trying to get to know them a little bit more than shouting out orders or anything like that. But if you ask some people, I probably was a little bit along those lines at certain stages. I think as a coach,
you go through phases. As
you build your relationship, you need to be able to do... You need to wear many hats, and I think that was probably one of the things that I did well, is you set your standard early on, and then once the players know what your standard is, you can probably drop back the way in which you interact with them to something different. So I think I was okay at trying to figure out how I was going to do that.
Yeah.
And understanding the person versus just, this is how I am and I'm going to do it this way the whole way, and it doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah.
I was able to adapt to whoever it was reasonably well.
Yeah, I think that's a very underrated skill
that
people don't talk about. That's really important as a coach,
to
be able to adapt to whoever's in front of you and be malleable in your communication style.
Yeah.
What was that culture like? Obviously, you had the cluster that we've spoken about with those boys, especially. Not sure exactly what girls were coming through at the time, but obviously I grew up playing with those boys, with Thanasi, Lee, Jack, Luke Saville. So it was a really good bunch of boys that actually did quite well in different respects, and all took different journeys, but all of them had success. So what do you remember from that time? What was the energy like? Why did you guys have so much success?
Again, great depth. Like the level of competition at training was always very good. You know, like whenever you threw the balls out there and we said we're going to play some tiebreakers or whatever it was, they wanted to compete, and they competed really well. And I think for me, and that's including the girls, it was Brooke Rishbeth was also one of those girls that was there that did really well in doubles and went to college, but they all wanted to compete and use each other to get better. Sometimes you had to probably go the other way and just back it off a little bit because it probably got a little too heated at times. So, and then you had someone like Luke who was unbelievably mature for his age. So he kind of led that group through in terms of how that maturity was going to run in squads. You just had a really good...
Just a bunch of different personalities and characters, in a way.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, for sure. I think it was just a really good environment and culture that they had that was about working hard, but at the same time they joked. It was fun. They knew each other pretty well. It was competitive, but it was fun, and they worked hard. Sometimes some of the boys might have got a little bit too much fun going on, but those are the things as a coach you can kind of lean into and figure out how that's going to make them tick. Yeah. And they all, I think one of the things at that time in Adelaide, you kind of get this big fish in a small sea approach. So you go watch them play in Adelaide, and they kind of, there's a bit of swagger there, there's a bit of ego there, but then you take them to a national event and they kind of go back in with their shell. None of them did that. They were all believers in their own ability. A couple of them probably didn't believe in it as much as they should have, but you take them to a national event, or you see them at a national event, and they were the same player with the belief that I can do well in this event here. There was no bluff. And that's what I think, because they knew each other, they knew the level every day, they were able to go there and go, this is no different. I know that there's no one here that's been training more or at a better level than I am, and I believe in what I can do. Yeah. And that's the part that I kind of noticed between some of those guys here. So in the Adelaide event, you go down to Millswood and watch them play, and they're the same player when you take them to Mildura to play the grass court nationals.
That's huge. Were there different aspects of the boys that you look at and you go, wow, like you've got something special for different reasons?
I think anyone you ask about Luke, like his professionalism was, you're not going to find a more professional person than Luke, especially at that age.
Still to this day.
Yeah.
I just look at how seriously he takes his movement, mobility, and all the 1%ers. Just amazing.
So Luke was a big one. Thanasi had unbelievably big length in his arms and legs, and the way that he could lasso the ball was pretty big. Like when he actually started smacking the ball around the place, you could kind of go, well, gee, that's pretty big. So his pure ability or natural ability just to hit it, that was pretty evident at a young age. Lee was an incredible mover and just timed the ball so well. So those sort of things really stuck out to me, were the ones that have kind of gone on and done that. But there were some other guys in there that, they were really competitive with all of those players, and they just pushed each other along. So, but those sort of things probably stuck out from that point of view. And again, their self-belief was, there was no difference whether they're playing a tournament here in Adelaide or whether they're playing a tournament nationally. And I think you'll find if you go to some events, you'll see a difference between players that are playing a local tournament.
I saw it recently.
Right. And then you go to a tournament where it's a national event or a bigger event. Whenever you put them in a position where it was a new experience, they still believed in their own ability. And that, to me, was a big part of what they did.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. You obviously would have learned a lot through that period. How did that transition to what you did next here in the state and, your next, I guess, coaching part of your journey?
I studied business at the same time because I wasn't necessarily sure what I was going to do. Once I left the performance area, I went down to Seaside with Sharon and Jason, and was only going to do probably 2 terms there, but ended up loving club life, I guess.
What'd you like about it?
The impact you can have on the kids and the community. I think the way in which the club responded in terms of what you were trying to do for everyone within the club, like set great standards again. I think that's probably one of the things that I learn is the standard and the culture that you create can translate to anywhere, and what you do with that with the kids. Like, we ended up probably having, I don't know, let's say 10 kids end up going to college from that period of time that that I was in Seaside, which I'm really proud of.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And some of them are still there, some of them have come back, but just I guess that level that you can take wherever you go, and the culture that you set, I think, is a really important one.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where it starts and ends. So, you set great standards. Mm-hmm. People know that when they come in to walk through your gates, that they're going to get a great standard of what you're doing. They're going to get great knowledge, and you really practice what you're talking to them about as well.
Yeah. What were some of the standards that you set, or the culture that you wanted to create at Seaside?
I think the big one was training environment, the way in which they were physical. I think if you kind of go out and want to play tennis and not be physical, you've not got a chance. So we were really physical. We try to be as competitive as we can, especially if you're talking about performance. I think if you're really wanting to be a tennis player, you've got to be a competitive person. So we would try and make sure that trainings were competitive. We would be physical. We would be engaged. So from the first moment you walk through the gate, you're here to get better. Have fun, but we're here to get better. Like, again, what I said to you before is, if you're going out to tennis training and you're not doing it because it's fun, like, that should be something that you see as fun. Trying to get better. And that was one of the things of my strengths when I was a kid, and I really wanted to try and have that with the club environment. So when you walk through the gates, you were really looking forward to coming down, but you were looking forward to not just getting there and having a joke. You were looking forward to getting better and working on some stuff and those sort of things. And I think that was the one thing that I really tried to work hard at from a club environment. And again, that starts with you as the coach. Every session, you just want to make sure you're engaging them and challenging them, rather than, there's times when it gets tiring out there on the court. Yeah. But you can't get tired. You've got to make sure that you're continually pushing them to challenge them. So,
yeah. Are there success stories for different reasons of players that you've worked with that you really felt like you made a big impact over a good period of time, and it could be for any journey, or that it didn't have to go to the top end?
I think I'll come back to the college ones. Those ones are really good stories. But some of the things that made me really proud was some of the sessions that I did on my first day at Seaside, but some of my last ones as well. So I think I was there for 7 years or 6 years. And to have people come back to see you over that period of time, that's a success for me, because they're engaging in tennis for a longer period of time than what they might not normally, and that's in part to how you're engaging them during the tennis session. So that's probably, I think I'd have 5 of those sort of kids that were not necessarily going on to be pro tennis players, but just love coming out and going through tennis with you. Yeah. I think that was probably the success story for me when I look back on that.
Yeah, that's great. And how did you get to work with Thanasi? Was that, how far into that journey with Seaside? How did that come about?
Well, I obviously developed a really good relationship with him during my time at TennisSA initially. So he was probably, 10 when I first started working in there. So I had a really good relationship with him. And I guess, we played a lot of video games together at certain stages. Like we might be on a trip or something like that. And we just got along well. Like, we're both into NBA. So we had a lot of, again, common interests in different things. And he rang me up one day, not long after I had my first child. So it's probably 3 years I'd been down at, 2 years I'd been down at Seaside. He said, would you come and spend some time with me on the road? And it was a tough conversation with my wife because it's away from having a young family. So we started, I said, yes, I can, but I probably can't do that many weeks. I think we started about 12. And I'd kind of chip in for when Todd Langman couldn't be there. And then that kind of moved and rolled into about 16 in the second year that I did it. And I don't know what it was in the third year that I did it. But it kind of just developed through that. We've got a lot of common interests. We still stay in touch now. Just through a lot of commonalities that are not just tennis but outside of tennis, and we kind of, I'd like to think we got on quite well on the tennis court. Like we had a pretty good relationship in the fact that because I knew him from such a young age, I could be really honest with him, and sometimes that doesn't necessarily mean saying things that he wants to hear, but actually some of the things that he might not want to hear. That was probably one of my strengths for him, is that I was never afraid to tell him what needed to be said.
And probably delivered it in a really good way as well with the relationship you had.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What sort of things were you looking to help him with at that part of his career?
I think understanding how to best use his shots. Like he's got such a... you see his best tennis is incredibly good. Like he can hit anyone off the court. I kid you not, I don't reckon I ever watched him lose a practice set with anyone. And we practiced with Federer for 2 weeks in Dubai. I never saw him lose a practice set. We practiced with a lot of good players. But just learning how to take that using of his game and implement that into match play a little bit more, so that it wasn't as predictable as, he's just going to hit a serve and it's just going to be a big forehand. And we tried to evolve the backhand a little bit to try and help him with using his forehand a little bit more. Some different stuff on serve direction, speeds and spins, and just understanding that were probably the big things on the court. And then, I don't know, I think off the court it was more so just being a sounding board. There's a lot of pressure on these people that are going out there and having to play, and just having someone there that you can trust to give you some honest feedback, I think was important for him, especially at the time when he's kind of growing and really trying to mature as he goes through this process. It's a hard thing to do on the road.
Yeah. He didn't have much of a childhood, and then he's thrusted straight to tour, and then he's trying to figure out who he is as a person, and he's on the road a lot, and not having a solid base. It's not easy.
No, exactly.
And you got to love it. What did you learn about the tour though? So obviously being a tour coach versus club coach, there's a lot of difference, and I would say that not much comparison. Almost, it's a completely different role. What did you observe by being on the tour? What are some of the differences from being a tour coach?
I think the ultimate test of tactical knowledge, like you got to know what you're talking about at that level, otherwise you're going to get found out, because players don't have glaring weaknesses like they might do at a club level, where you kind of have a player and you go, look, kid, as they get older, it goes from more of a technical error to, you're going to need to expose this person's movement, because the only time it's going to break down is if their movement's not there, and that's when it's going to break down. Whereas at a club level, a forehand might just break down because it might break down. And I think that to me is the ultimate test of tactical knowledge. But I still, one of the hardest things to do is coach a 5-year-old and get a 5-year-old to do what you wanted them to do. That sort of thing is probably harder to do for me than what it was to say, okay, I've got to find some weaknesses in this person's game because Thanasi's playing him in the next round. So those sort of things probably are stark differences in the way that you got to coach. Like the way in which you behave for a 5-year-old when you're on court, and we've talked about this a lot, is going to be totally different to the way in which you behave if you're coaching a player on the tour. And so I think as a coach, you've got to be able to have that in your toolkit to be able to know, well, who am I actually engaging with and how am I going to communicate with them. So I think for me that's a big one. But I mean, there's no greater feeling than kind of coming up with something that you have helped develop in the tactical side of it, and you see that pay off in a match win. It's the same feeling you get when you're 10 years old, winning a match for yourself. So
that's really cool. Yeah,
that's probably what stood out to me at that real elite end. And then there's just the players know how to play. Like there's nothing there where you're going to go, oh, this is a really obvious mistake. And I think as players get older, it becomes less and less about the technical, becomes more and more about the physical and the tactical. As they're younger, you can kind of explore people through through their technical.
Yeah, 100%. What were some memorable matches with Thanasi or memorable times that you had that stood out?
Yeah, our first event together, he made the final of the 250 in Los Cabos. So he beat Tiafo in the first round, Fritz in the semis or quarters, Burditch. Like, he had a really good week in that first week we were together. So that was kind of like, okay, well,
we're on here.
Yeah, we're on here. So that was a really good week. And then and just the quality of player that was there. And then he qualified at the Australian Open one year, beating a couple of players to get through into that, which was really exciting. And then probably he played a challenger in Las Vegas, and the challenger had some skill, like it had some really good players in it, and he won that. So they were probably three highlights. I forget who they had in the event in Las Vegas, but the quality of it, I think Opelka was one of them. But the quality of it was just really good. Yeah.
What do you help him with initially for him to go so well in Los Cabos? Was that just new environment? Was there something you felt like you brought that actually helped him initially straight away that he could grab onto?
I don't know. You might have to ask him that one.
Hope I do.
Yeah, exactly. I just think for me, it was just we could be each other and understand each other, which I guess is how a good relationship is formed. And I think for him to feel comfortable in expressing whatever it was that he needed to express was really important for him. Yeah. And I think it might have been a new environment. The conditions, it was hot, it was bouncy, and we probably didn't have the best lead up going into it, but just I guess him feeling comfortable. I think when you see a lot of players perform well on the court, a lot of the stuff that they've had bubbling away off the court is kind of pretty smooth, and I think that one probably helped Thanasi a little bit with him off the court. We were able to kind of talk about other things. Yeah, nice. Not necessarily, for us, it was not necessarily all about tennis all the time.
Just catching up as mates for the first time again.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did working with Thanasi, how did that actually help you as a coach outside of that?
So if you ever went away so I'd go away on trips, let's say it's for 4 weeks, and you come home and you see some of the kids that are playing, straight away you can kind of, because you haven't seen them day in, day out.
It's like fresh set of eyes.
Straight away you kind of go, boom, okay, look, that's pretty obvious. And I've just come from the highest possible level.
Yep. To
see, okay, that's pretty obvious right there.
And you see kind of where it leads.
Yeah. So you can see that straight away. That was probably the thing that I look forward to the most. When you come back, you kind of come back into it and you go, okay, I'm going to be able to see this straight away. And I kid you not, you could see it with every player. You could kind of go, okay, I need to have a look at that because that's standing out. I think that would probably be the thing that helped my coaching. And with that level, you don't have long to get your message across.
Yeah.
You can't sit there for 2 minutes and start rambling on. They're just going to go, mate, that's too much. I've got to be able to pinpoint, within the first 10 seconds, you've got to be able to get a message across, and then you're out again. You can't come back in. You're not talking to them all the time.
Yeah, it's so true.
And I think for me, being able to be really clear with your message with minimal words was probably the big thing for me, because they just don't have time to be thinking about too much stuff.
Yeah, makes sense. Why did you leave Clubland? Was that always a decision that or always a pathway? Why did you leave Clubland, and I guess why did you go to TennisSA?
I always thought that I was going to coach long term. That was, if you'd asked me 6 months before, that was always going to be what I was going to do. But I had this kind of ambition I'm really passionate about tennis and tennis in South Australia.
Yeah.
And wanting to make a positive impact. And I felt like where I was, let's say we have 500 junior players, whatever it is, I'm having a really positive impact on those, and which I really liked. But what I felt like is let's say I could help more coaches have more impact on tennis in the state. That's what I kind of sat down one day and just thought, man, I think I can do that. And it really started to motivate me. And I really am a believer of it takes one really, really good coach to have a massive impact on the tennis industry.
Yeah.
Coaching is so important to the tennis industry. And the coaches that we've got here are so important to the tennis industry. So I just, for me, it was that motivation of how can I have a greater impact on tennis in South Australia. And this role with Tennis Australia came about, and it was just something that I just felt like really motivated me. And it was probably the only time that I felt like I was going to come out of coaching for good and say, look, I really want to have an impact on this. So yeah, that's kind of how it came about.
Nice. And I look at it that way, like how you're describing it, it really feels that's what your intention is. And every time I've spoken to you, I get that feeling. Because the way I think about it is you're the glue between Tennis Australia, TennisSA, and then the clubs itself. And we do need that person in the middle that understand how clubland works, because you've been in it and you've coached at the highest level, but then also knows how it works on the other end. So what sort of things are you really trying to help to actually make the coaches better? And what are sort of the things that you're looking for in terms of to improve what's happening, how we can make the state be in a really good position?
I think as a tennis coach, in your club, it can get quite lonely. I'll use the word lonely, where you feel like you're probably the only person that's kind of trying to drive the club or that area going forward. And for me, it's about trying to create more of a collaboration between coaches. Everyone's got their own businesses and the way they want to run it. But what I want to help people understand is the stronger that we are individually, the stronger we are as a group, the better the competition is that we can actually, or play opportunities that we have, the better tennis is for these participants that are coming through, whether that be a junior player or an adult player. And I think potentially in the past, it's kind of felt like everyone's kind of in it for themselves, thinking that if their club's strong, that's what they've got to get done. But I think for me, it's about understanding that we have an obligation to the tennis industry and community to drive not only our club, but the clubs around us, and make sure that everyone's going really well, because that's how we're going to be stronger. And I think for me, that's the key, because I get to speak to so many coaches, and most people are on the same page.
Yeah.
When I say most people, 99.9% of people are really trying to drive the tennis industry. And for me to be able to link that and say, look, the person down the road's doing the same thing, and we need to make sure that we're doing this together because it's going to be better for us individually. That, to me, is what I think is really important, because we can't produce, in my opinion, great players unless we've got the depth that we need there. And if we don't have the depth, as coaches, we're not going very well, and as players, we're not going very well. So I think to try and help coaches have stronger businesses to really drive that depth, I think is going to be better for the tennis industry as a whole. And I think that, to me, is kind of what I feel as motivation, and help influence. Like you said, I feel like I do have a fairly good background in tennis, from the journey of grassroots right through to professional level. And that, to me, is a pretty big key, to be able to talk to coaches individually to hand over some of that experience. I think some coaches might think they know what they're doing at the top end, but they've never really experienced it.
Of course.
Or they might think they know what they're doing at the bottom end, but like I said, the hardest thing to do is work with a 5-year-old and help them get something better. Whereas I feel like I've kind of been through that journey, not just as a player, but as a coach as well, from both ends. So that was kind of the motivation, is to see if I can have some positive impact with that experience for everyone to kind of buy into. And some people go, well, we don't want to listen to you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
But then you have more impact on the people that do want to listen, which
Exactly.
is, and then all those people get better, and then everyone else just follows on anyway.
Yeah.
So you've obviously been in clubland, coach at the highest level, been with TennisSA in the past. Now you're working with Tennis Australia and TennisSA.
Mm-hmm.
What are things are you noticing, having almost like an observer's view, being in it on the other side, but now like looking from your perspective? What are some of the issues that you feel clubs could get better at, or performance businesses can get better at, that you're observing?
I think there's an incredible group of people that work at TennisSA really trying to drive. Like, you can sense when you walk through the door how much motivation there is to drive tennis forward. When you go and meet with coaches, you can sense that as well. Like I said, I've probably only had one or two people that you kind of go, oh, I'm just not sure where the motivation is there. To be able to mesh those two together is so important, because we're all working in that one direction. And I think that's been something that I've really tried to work hard at, and feels like it's going in the right direction. So
definitely
agree
with that.
And I think that for that to be the case, that's going to push tennis in the right direction as well, because we all love the sport. We all want to make sure that we leave the sport in a better position than when we found it. And you can sense that on both sides, because I'm lucky enough to meet individual businesses and work in an office with some really motivated people at TennisSA.
Yeah. And what sort of things are you wanting to drive forward? Like, if you look ahead to, I guess, maybe some personal goals that you have, or goals within Tennis Australia, what are you looking to make an impact on?
I think we've got a really great opportunity in the modified ball space to match modified ball coaching up with great play opportunities for kids.
Yeah.
I think there's a huge opportunity there, which I want to see where that goes. That would, straight off the top of my head, would be a big one.
Because you see that in Europe, like how well they do that with some of the modified ball, when you have kids playing amazing tennis on a red ball court, orange ball court, and you don't really see that in Australia. Yeah.
So I think there is I guess it's a participation, but it's also a area where you can develop your performance as well, because if you get that right.
Yeah, it can be done.
So that's probably a really big area that I think that there's room for opportunity in. And then, like, coaches have such great IP that we just need to make sure that we are listening to, and trying to incorporate and make it better for coaches, and how do they deliver the lesson or what they're trying to deliver in their programs. So you're
saying that coaches just be more open to learn and grow and work together, or improve their knowledge in a way?
No, yes and no, but I also think it needs to go the other way as well. Actually listen. I think it's all well and good for me to say, oh, I've got this great experience and I can come and help you. But it's also important for me to listen to, you've got great experience too. So how do we incorporate that into what we do to make this better?
Sure.
I think it's got to go both ways, and I think that's something that I'm really strong on. And it's not just, I'm going to educate you on this. Yeah. It's actually got to go back the other way as well, and go, well, what about this as an idea, or something like that, where we actually start engaging and listening to what the coaches really want and need, to help them deliver tennis. And I think that that's something that I guess I haven't necessarily want to start on. It's something that I'm trying to engage the whole way through.
Nice. And where did this lead for you? Like, do you see yourself in this role long term?
I don't have an answer to that one. I guess.
Are you enjoying the stability with obviously having a bigger family now? Is that I guess one big difference from the coaching aspect, because you're coaching like afternoons into nights? It's a bit sporadic in hours sometimes.
I love what I do right now. I with that comes sacrifice. Like, I miss going to the courts every day and going, I'm going to go work with a kid today that wants to do this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be part of this journey. There's no greater motivation for that.
Yeah.
There's no, I think coaches can't take for granted the fact that they walk in their club and they're the hero of that club. You got kids running up to you, go, hey, look, this is what I did at school today. That's a great, something that all coaches should be really proud of.
Yeah.
And I guess I missed that side of it.
Of course.
But really, really passionate about trying to drive tennis in the direction that I feel like we can drive it in. And I guess that's, at the moment, I'm just living in that moment and trying to make sure that I'm doing that every day, because I don't want to talk about it but then actually not action it. Same as coaching.
Love it.
So that's kind of where I'm at the moment. It's just I guess it's different for me because it's not necessarily on court every day.
Yeah.
But I try to say this to coaches. You know, sometimes coaches go, "Oh, geez, it's been a long term. I'm tired." I said, don't take for granted what you do.
Yeah.
Because the impact that you're having on the tennis club, the kids, the families, and the community, you don't realise that until you're actually not in that area.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important part to coaches understanding what they do. It's not just about the forehand and backhand.
100%. Any final advice for coaches in performance or even players that you, from your journey and your experience, that you'd give?
Never stop learning. I think the thing for me is, as tennis players, we are told at a young age that you've got to have a big ego and have all the answers for yourself. If you go into coaching, it's actually the other way around. You've got to try and expand everything that you know to keep offering the kids different lessons and engage them, because if you just run the same thing over and over again, it's going to get boring pretty quickly. So I think for me, growth mindset with everything that you do when it comes to coaching, because the minute you're not, you're behind straight away. And I think with today's modern coaching landscape, there's so much to learn. It's not private lessons anymore. There's so much that comes with the business of tennis coaching that the opportunities to learn are endless. So just continue to try and learn. And then for young coaches, there's just so much opportunity out there. Like the lifestyle that you can live being a tennis coach. And I think sometimes the public don't see it as the full-time profession that it is.
Yeah. I've had so many people go like, what? Like, you're a coach full-time?
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah. So I think for me, having the understanding that it's such a great lifestyle financially, from a motivation point of view, to be able to wake up every day and know that you're helping someone else get better, there's nothing like that. And I think that's such an important thing for anyone thinking about getting into tennis coaching. That's what's going to drive you. And if that's something that really drives you, then it's there's great opportunities out there at the moment, because tennis is in a really good spot. There's lots of people playing. You walk around, you talk to every coach, they're like, yep.
It's growing for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's due to the quality of coaches that we do have in our environment. I'm really lucky with the coaches that I get to speak to because of their knowledge.
Yeah.
But there's an area for opportunity for any young coach that's looking to get into the game and get in there and really try and learn from some of the great coaches that we do have
100%.
here.
Yeah, that's an action call to anyone that is passionate about the game
100%.
to get involved, because we want more people part of it. And you can see like the globalization of the sport, the marketing, and how it's been marketed through social media. It's really making an impact. I feel like a lot of people are now gravitating and having more eyes on tennis from different lenses, and it's the game's growing.
Yep.
Definitely growing in Australia. I feel like it's becoming one of the biggest sports again. I don't know, I would almost argue that's one of the biggest sports behind AFL. I think almost challenging soccer in a way.
Yeah.
To become one of the great big sports again. So it's awesome to be part of that. Joel, thank you so much for coming down today.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate the mentorship and everything you're doing for the state, and it's been great to build that connection. I feel like you've helped me in many ways and helping many other clubs and other coaches around the state. So we appreciate your work. Thank you.
Pleasure's mine.